Welcome to week 113 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
As usual, during a week when I'm wearing my Santa Barbara shirt, we supplement the presentation with one of my mugs from my collection. And this week, it's my friend's mug that I got probably in 97 or 98 when I went to see a taping of Friends. Usually keep that in the background, but we're facing this way today, so.
And I actually have a friend's mug as well, which was given to me for Christmas. And I still haven't
I
unwrapped
totally
it.
forgot about that. It was facing away this whole time. Exciting for our viewers. Okay, this is the week of September 22nd, or 21st if you start on Sunday. And over the weekend, a new series premiered called Cold Steel and Neon, starring a very young Christina Applegate. This show was only going to last for a year, so she'll be starring in Married with Children in the coming years. But that's one of the not so famous series from the 1986 fall U.S. primetime television schedule. It's Monday, September 22nd in Santa Barbara, and Cruz tells Santana he's waiting for the warrant to search Keith's apartment, and not to mention it to Gina or Keith. Now, I feel like Santana might not be able to keep her
Going
mouth
to be
shut.
mentioned to Gina and Keith. Pretty sure.
Santana sarcastically suggests to Keith that they should get back together so he can reap the benefits of destroying her marriage. I feel like just the way they're writing Santana, the implication is she's over her troubles and she's going to be a force to be reckoned with.
Well, we certainly saw that side of her in her first iteration when she was so single-mindedly pursuing her parenthood with Brandon.
It'd be good to see that Santana back.
Yeah.
It's late at night, but Santana shows up at the Capwell house to visit Brandon, so they pull him out of bed in his pajamas. Nice to see Brandon call back. Last time we talked about Brandon, he was at summer camp, which is weird. You'd think Brandon Call would be available during the summer when he doesn't have school, and less available in the September. But here they are, bringing him back. So Brandon says he misses Cruz. Now Brick, who's visiting in the middle of the night, overhears this and realizes how much Johnny is going to be missing out, not being able to know Amy.
Yeah, we're kind of in a little bit of Dark Shadows territory in this episode, in that a lot of events are happening late at night.
That's right. We would always comment watching Dark Shadows. It's like 2 a.m. and people are still showing up at the house. Cruz and Victoria decide they have to tell Eden most of what happened. Victoria says that she was out of town one summer when she and Cruz were dating, back in Hollywood for a role. And Cruz came down with hepatitis, and Katie took care of him. Then they kind of gloss over the fact that Cruz slept with Katie one time. As Victoria relates, it was one time. So
Whoopsie.
that must be what they told her. And when Victoria returned, however, of course, she and Cruz just resumed where they left off. As you might imagine, Katie was somewhat jealous of this, and as Victoria tells it, Katie became more and more jealous and started stalking them, leaving them threatening messages and calls, which resulted in the morning that Katie drowned, Victoria telling her off and telling her to get lost. So I'm seeing a seed here that Katie may have committed suicide as a result of this, which it's not clear if Keith thinks that, but if he does, then it makes sense that he would be angry at both Victoria and Cruz over the situation. If he thinks it's, I was thinking he thinks it's murder, but maybe he thinks it's suicide.
We do have hints here that there is a bit of mental instability, perhaps, on Katie's part. Although I can certainly see why she would be grieved by the situation, even with the sanitized version that we've received.
We did see a flashback, though, and we saw the actress who plays Katie for the first time. Cruz and Eden were in their swimsuits, lying on a blanket on the beach, making out, and Katie shows up at the beach. Presumably this was that day, and that she promptly jumped into the water after that scene. So I think we only ever see Katie in 2 or 3 flashbacks. So this character's not going to be fleshed out too much more. It leads me to wonder exactly what they're hiding from Eden? Is it just the fact that Katie stumbled upon them making out, or is there more? But, Eden was, I think even at the end of this episode, Eden started thinking, maybe there is more. So no matter how much they tell Eden to try and placate her, she's always trying to pick at the story.
Well, and I think for a lot of women, this story would raise a few red flags that their best beloved had these previous liaisons and was sleeping with one woman while he was ostensibly with another. I mean, it doesn't really make for promising relationship material when you hear these stories.
Cruz blaming it on hallucinations from his illness. I mean,
Yeah.
that's glossed over too, right? Maybe that'll be one of the flashbacks. Yeah, I mean, Keith takes the opportunity to mention again that, in that scene with Santana, that Victoria and Santana and Katie are all collateral damage of Cruz's relationships. Gina nearly gets caught planting the pills in Keith's litter box. Keith comes home, but is distracted by Victoria, who's shown up to talk to him. Victoria tells Keith that Cruz never encouraged Katie. This is interesting because I would think sleeping with her is somewhat encouraging.
I think so.
But I believe this scene actually happened before the scene where Victoria talks to Eden, so it's even more interesting. Gina chases Keith's cat through the neighborhood because just as she has managed to sneak out of the apartment and wipe down all the surfaces, the cat grabbed the handkerchief that she was using to wipe off her fingerprints, and presumably it's monogrammed or something. So a police officer discovers her rolling around in the garbage behind Keith's place. She manages to fend off his request for ID, but he insists on walking her home. So Gina just lets him take her to Keith's place. Luckily, Keith is not back yet from his talk with Victoria. And, I guess she replaces the bowl of food that she was using to try to lure the cat back. And she's got her handkerchief. The cat's back in place. But Keith comes home once again. So Gina hides in the closet. And the first thing Keith does is phone Gina's number. And, of course, she doesn't answer. And he thinks, no one can be that drunk. So then she hears him call the work saying, you know what, forward all my calls to Gina Timmons' apartment. And he leaves. And Gina realizes she's got to get back in that bed before Keith gets to her place. And somehow we see her, I think, I looked away for a second, or I was typing. I think she climbed in the window and just laid herself out on the bed just as Keith was entering her apartment. So she even had to run back for her cane because she is still limping from this gunshot wound that Santana gave her in the leg.
So one of the things we've talked about, I think in several previous episodes, is just trying to get a handle of where the distances come in between different locations. So I guess we have to assume that Gina's place is pretty close by.
And I'm not entirely convinced it's not still that motel because the layout doesn't seem that dissimilar to when she was living in that hotel. Because does she have any money? I mean, she had the Mrs. Capwell's cookies money, but then there was the big lawsuit. So it's not clear how much money Gina actually has to live on. Well, of course, Keith's main reason for wanting to hang out with Gina is so he could have sex with her. So he's a bit disappointed that she's still unconscious because she pretends she's still out of it. He kind of prods her a few times, and eventually she pretends to wake up, and he makes her some coffee, and she takes a shower, and then she's like, okay, well, it's getting late, you should go. And for a while, it's like she's trying to push him out, but it looks like she was just teasing him, because then she takes off her robe, and they make love on Gina's bed. But not before Santana leaves a voicemail on Gina's answering machine that Keith finds a little suspicious. Even though Santana doesn't say much, he's wondering why Santana would seemingly be chummy with Gina if she was really about to go after Gina for drugging her. So I think Keith, perhaps seeing a kindred spirit in Gina, suspects that she might be trying to set him up.
Well, because they're both sociopaths, so they're kind of birds of a feather. And they have been flocking together, but sometimes they don't.
Back at the Capwell house, Brick asks Cece when he's going to reopen that casino. He says he doesn't want Lily to claim Amy's death as a victory. Cece really seemed surprised by this, and I'm thinking, for all we know, Cece might already be shutting down the operations and selling off the stock, right? He really was very non-committal to Brick.
Now, from the moment Dylan Hartley opened this casino, I've been hoping we would see a scene of it being burnt to the ground, or to the water, I guess.
And we had Buzz's burned down recently, so I wonder if that'll be too much catching fire. But I honestly don't remember how the casino ever, got wrapped up. So we may well see it on fire. And then with this Amy fire, in my head from 35 years ago, I might have mixed those two things together. So there may yet be a fire. Of course, this year I was going to university, but usually I would have 3 classes on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and then a 3-hour class on Tuesday and another 3-hour class on Thursday. Unknowingly, those 3-hour classes usually were from 1 to 4, so I missed out on Another World, Santa Barbara, and I would have to choose which one to audio tape, because the 2-hour audio tapes are only 1 hour on each side. And so probably some of this year I taped Another World, and some of this 4-month period I taped Another World, and some I taped Santa Barbara. So some of these episodes I may have heard, some I may have glossed over, depending what storylines were interesting to me. So maybe I should track down those 1986 Another World episodes on YouTube and make sure I've seen them all so I can check them off my list. And then sometimes Mondays, Wednesdays, and Friday I would probably, try to get home in time to watch at least one of the shows. So that was basically how I did most of my scheduling throughout my university career, is scheduling it based on TV shows. Of course, it's 1986. You'd think someone who liked television as much as me would have thought, hey, maybe I should get a VCR. But the thought had never crossed my mind, bizarrely. So, thank goodness for YouTube and all these episodes being on there by the clever people who did buy a VCR back in 1986. Sophia tells Cece that she could tell that Victoria is acting when she says she's over Cruz. Eden tells Sophia that she shouldn't try to have blasted Victoria back to Los Angeles. But Sophia says, well, I'm your mother. I'm always going to do that. So. It's after midnight, and Sophia finds Cece opening RSVPs for the wedding. And she says, oh, why don't you come back to bed? And he goes, there's no difference between upstairs and downstairs if we have to wait till the wedding to make love. I might as well just sit down here. So anyway, she's like nibbling on his ear and trying to get him to come upstairs. Sophia says, we want to have something to look forward to. And Cece says, well, I'll be looking forward to 5 solid days of sleep. And you can look forward to my snoring. And then Sophia says, well, while you're snoring, maybe I'll go out shopping. So that was a cute Cece-Sophia scene. And the wedding things are moving ahead. It's amazing how they can drag these things out, because I'm pretty sure it's still going to be November. So unless I'm totally misremembering something about this wedding. So yeah, somehow they're going to drag this out for 2 months. But like they dragged out something in this episode, they had which one was it? I don't remember. Oh yeah, Gina. The last episode ended with Keith just about to discover Gina in his house. Mm-hmm. And then, they have this whole detour of he leaves to go with Victoria. She searches the neighborhood for the cat. And then at the end of the episode, they're basically in the same position they were at the end of the previous episode, of him walking in and her hiding in his apartment. So it's amazing how soap opera writers can drag things out if they're asked to. Some shows were, there was one time on Days of Our Lives where just months would go by and, Hope would still be hanging off the same cliff she was a month earlier. Insane dragging out. As a writer, I can't imagine even, not being so frustrated and not being able to move the story forward. So, anyway, that is it for our September 22nd episode, Monday.
We should mention something.
Okay, I don't know what we've forgotten.
We should mention our surprise bonus Nick Coster sighting from last night.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes, it was. I heard the voice first, and I was so excited since he passed away a few months ago. We were watching Lessons in Chemistry on Apple TV Plus, which I think I may have mentioned. We have 3 months free thanks to this new AirBook Mac, or MacBook Air, or MacBook AirBook. So yeah, Lessons in Chemistry episode 3. He showed up as a college professor, and it's not clear if he will be in any future episodes or if this is a one-time thing. But he looked really cool with his beard and was doing a very interesting character. So if you have Apple Plus TV or Apple TV Plus, check it out. He's got a couple of short but nice scenes. That is it for the Monday episode. We'll see you in 2 minutes after we watched episode 547 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Tina! You drowned? But don't blame me if I go out there and do what's necessary to make sure the hurt killer gets what's coming to her.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 548 of Santa Barbara. In between these last 2 viewings, though, we've spotted some Santa Barbara stars on various things. We watched The After Party, season 2, episode 6, I think. And we saw a beach that looked very much like the beach where Julia first saw Dylan swim ashore. And the beach that we probably have seen in lots of movies. And possibly future episodes of Santa Barbara that take place on the beach. Peter Mark Richmond was in an episode of McCloud. And Paige Mosley, Dylan Hartley himself, popped up on Melrose Place that we watched Monday night, playing a guy named Vic, who was a complete psycho. So he had some good training on Santa Barbara.
Yeah, and given the cliffhanger of that episode of Melrose Place, I think we will be seeing him probably at least once more.
I feel like when I originally watched Melrose Place, I didn't recognize him. There being a 10-year gap between Santa Barbara and that, and his face was much fuller and he was less scrawny looking. Tuesday, September 23rd, 1986, and Victoria tries to get Keith to read one of Katie's letters so that he can stop blaming Cruz, but he does not seem interested. But I think, in all the confusion, couldn't tell, but I think she might have left at least one of the letters at his place.
Yeah, he was still holding it in his hand when she got ushered out of the room. So.
Cruz tells Victoria, "You didn't tell me about those letters and calls. I don't know if I have the whole story. This leads me to wonder if I understand the dynamics of what went on here." So this is an interesting twist that when Victoria told Keith the whole story, Cruz learned some new facts as well. Cruz tells Santana that the warrant to search Keith's apartment was turned down. So Cruz takes it upon himself to phone the judge directly, and he gets it approved. He makes some snide comment that the judge plays golf with Keith. The judge promptly phones Keith to warn him. And Keith says, if they have a search warrant, they must have planted something here. And he turns his apartment upside down looking for the drugs, which he eventually finds in the litter box. And just as Cruz arrives, he puts them in his coat pocket. But during the course of events, after failing to turn anything up in the search, Cruz decides to pat down Keith and finds the pills in his pocket. He probably should have picked them up with a handkerchief so there wouldn't be any fingerprints on them.
Yeah. Now I was noticing that when Gina was handling them, she wasn't always that careful. So I would think her prints would be on them.
Well, she had that handkerchief. I think she wiped them down at the last minute. So Gina does something weird in this episode. She writes a very crudely written note that looks like it's been scrawled in like the sort of a match head. It's very large lettering and very unclear writing, and looks like a kid wrote it. We're trying to figure out what's this note, who's it for, and it ends up in Cruz's hands. And he ends up opening it at one point, but I don't think he gets around to reading it. So we'll find out in the next episode what's in that note. Mason tells Ted, "You've got to stop shouting to the world how much you love Haley. It makes for a lousy defense. The quickest way to attract suspicion is to go around screaming that you're innocent. Shut up." Haley says, "How did Lily let it get this far?" Ted says, "I guess her crystal ball clouded up." Gina says that she and Ted are finally on the same side for once. And Ted says to Haley, "I know why you're trying to be so cold, but you wouldn't worry about me going to jail if you didn't love me. That's going to keep me going." Ted gets up and Gina says to Haley, "This is not a Doris Day movie." So, Gina's trying to rein things in. Mason's trying to rein things in. And Ted's doing his usual Ted thing. He does tell her that he walked out of the interrogation, too. So, Gina visits Lily, who is once again wearing white. And she tells Lily that she missed the deadline to get out of town. She actually visits Lily, what I believe is Mason's apartment. I think that's where Lily has ended up moving. Gina says, "Everything's falling apart for you. I've decided to get Mason back. So if that's why you're sticking around." Later, Gina finds Mason drinking at the Orient Express, and she tastes his liquor, and it's completely unwatered down. Gina says, "Would you like me better if I basked in a white light and put on a white robe?" And Mason says, "Disrobing was your specialty." Gina tells Mason that Lily went to see Brick, which, of course, Mason is not too happy about. You think Gina and Mason will ever get back together?
Anything is possible.
Brick is trying to get Julia to do something about Lily, but she tells him to wait for Cruz in the prosecutor's office to make a move. But Brick says, "Don't blame me if I go out there and do what's necessary." And that's just one of several threats to Lily that Brick makes in front of several people. Mason tries to calm Brick down. Santana offers to watch Johnny, and Brick says, "Thanks, I've got something to settle with Lily Light." Ted asks Brick to lay off Haley. And Brick says, "I don't care if Lily hypnotized her. She threw that bomb. You know it, I know it, except you won't say it." Ted says, "Don't take Haley away from me. I love her." Brick says, "Then you're just going to have to live without her. Could you forgive and forget if it was Haley who died in that fire?" Brick shows up at Keith's apartment, but Keith once again tells him that Lily wasn't at the scene, and so he can't arrest her. Santana visits Brick to find that he's pulled out a gun and is on his way to see Lily. Brick says, "I want someone to hurt and I want someone to die, like Amy died." Brick eventually is talked down and lets her take the gun from him, but he says, "Just put it in that drawer over there," which I don't think is quite the security that Santana was intending, but she does that. Lily Lytle arrives at the front door of the Perkins house with flowers, and Brick starts to strangle her. And Mason does arrive just at that point. So we'll see how things go with the strangling of Lily Light in the next episode.
You know, if things run true to form on this show, Lily Light will end up mysteriously dead, and Brick will be in court for her murder, and then we'll have at least 6 court cases running at the same time, all of which are very similar. Yes.
That's it for this Tuesday episode. The episode that we had the credits cut off, unfortunately, so only the first 4 or 5 ran, and they cut off right after Rosa Andrade, Margarita Cordova, so she's still in the credits, so her contract must still be in play. I don't know if that means she gets paid necessarily. I don't think so. So that's it for the Tuesday episode. We will see you after we watch episode 549 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
So special about last night?
It was different.
Well, different only because you were taking advantage of my condition. I mean, I hardly knew what I was doing.
That's your permanent condition.
At least I don't pretend to be something I'm not.
No, not this week, anyway.
Mason, would you like me better if I basked in a white light and donned a white robe?
As I recall, disrobing was your specialty.
If you're saying that Keith Timmons could be locked up, I can assure you I'd like nothing better. If anything I can do to speed things along, you just let me know.
Welcome to episode 549 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
Victoria finds Eden in her dressing room, demanding to know the rest of the story. Victoria gives Eden Katie's letters to read while she rushes back on stage. Victoria mentions to Eden that Cruz used to be so wild and impulsive. Eden says, "You think I've tamed this wild creature?" Victoria says, "I hope not." What do you want? Friendship? And Eden says, "Anything's possible, but I don't think the odds favor it." Eden sends Cruz a note to meet her at the airport, and she asks if it brings back memories of Victoria. Cruz says this place means nothing to him, so Eden starts to kiss him. I think Eden is trying to supplant Cruz's memory of making love to Victoria on that spot. Utterly bizarre.
I don't care about any of this.
Keith accuses Cruz of planting the pill bottle. Keith accuses Santana of being in on it. Santana visits Victoria to commiserate about how jealous Eden is of Cruz's exes. Then Keith bursts in to accuse them both of being in on it. Cruz asks Mason what would happen if a public servant were found in possession of controlled substances. Mason says, "If you're saying that Keith Timmons could be locked up, I'd like nothing better. Anything I can do to help speed things along?" Cruz tells Santana that the lab report isn't back yet, but if they can prove it's the same drug she was taking, maybe she won't have to face the hit-and-run charge. Santana says, "I hope that someday we won't remember how it ended. We'll only remember how it began." I remember that it began with a fake marriage so that you could take your son away from Gina.
Wasn't that romantic?
No, not at all. Mason stops Brick from strangling Lily. Brick announces it's better to do it when there are no witnesses. And when it happens, it's going to be like it was for Amy, with no one around. Mason demands to know Lily's secret. She swears him to secrecy and tells him during the commercial break, so we don't hear it. So Mason knows the secret. Lily says, "Maybe that's why I felt I had to invent myself. I felt so worthless. I finally made up my mind that I was going to be so special that everyone would pay attention to me. Even..." And then Mason cuts her off. "All right, it all makes a bizarre kind of sense now." Thoughts on Lily's secret?
Well, I feel like she's related to Gina somehow. They look a lot alike. She's got a vendetta against Gina. So I think it involves Gina in some way.
I assume we'll find out soon, once people start knowing. And Mason's been drinking a lot. He might say something. Nick is photographing Alice at the Lockridge house so he can put together a modeling portfolio for her. He seems to think she's got what it takes. Jane is upset with the whole situation and demands that Alice return the dress that Nick bought her. Jane says Alice can be hurt very easily right now. And Nick says, have some respect for her intuition, her instincts. Try not to make her as suspicious of men as you seem to be. Paul shows up to take Alice on a date, and he is equally unhappy with the idea of her being a model. He asks her to take off her makeup before their date. Alice is still upset when she sees Paul's badge. This is while they're having dinner at the Orient Express, I believe. She tells him that a police officer shot her father, but he didn't die. Alice smiles when Nick shows up at the Orient Express. Nick says, "There's that $1 million smile." And Paul says, "Let's not put a price on it."
Nick's almost a little bit back to his kind of creepy self that he was when he was with Kelly, way back in the ghost town, and she had amnesia, and that was kind of how he liked her the best. Also, it should be noted that while Alice is perhaps pursuing a modeling career, she is also needing explanations of things like clothing,
How to use the phone.
how clothing works,
How a menu works.
what photographs are.
Yeah.
So it's a really sort of strange dynamic that is developing here.
But it is kind of weird that Jane and Paul are both so against Alice having a career, because without any kind of a mind, possibly being a model is the only thing she can do. I honestly can't remember what Alice does for the rest of her time on the show. So that's interesting. I remember her dad a little bit when they finally track him down. Lionel is digging up some grass to make a garden for Minx while she's out of town. And Jane brings him some lemonade. He finds a fossil, which Jane misidentifies, but it turns out she majored in paleontology. And they have a great afternoon together as Lionel regales her with his tales. Jane says, "You are the strangest man that I ever met." And Lionel says, "I didn't have to work that hard to get there." Jane says, "People say I'm strange too." And Lionel says, "Join the club."
It's nice to see Lionel again, and this was a pairing I would never have expected. It was kind of interesting.
I know, we were talking about all the singles on the show and who's going to end up with who, and suddenly this one episode is like, maybe Lionel and Jane.
Well, even as kind of scene partners, it was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there was a look on Jane's face at the end that made me think she was interested in Lionel. But definitely, yeah, that's a great pair to have on screen together. So hope we see that more. Yeah, we've got Paul dating Alice. Nick is interested in her as a photographer, as far as I can tell. That's his only interest. But then, there was Pearl, who was maybe a bit interested in Alice too. So, yeah. We'll see. We'll see who Jane ends up with, who Alice ends up with, who Haley ends up with. And that is the end of the episode. We had an announcer telling us to get ready for the season premiere tonight of Highway to Heaven, and the 1-hour premiere of Gimme a Break, as well as the season premiere of Saint Elsewhere. Rosa is still in the credits, and Sophia Capwell-Armonti is in the credits, without the slash between Capwell and Armonti this time. Once again, it seems to be alternating. And on Dynasty tonight, we will find out how that cliffhanger gets resolved. As you recall, in May, Blake was strangling Alexis for all that she's done to his family, and Amanda was in peril as La Mirage was on fire. So we'll find out tonight how that cliffhanger on Dynasty is resolved. And then we'll be back tomorrow to talk about episode 550 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
What do you want, Victoria Lane? Between us? Mutual respect, I guess. Friendship is possible. You think it's possible? Anything's possible. I really don't think the odds favor it, though.
There's that beautiful smile. That beautiful $1 million smile.
Hey, let's not keep putting a price on it, okay?
Welcome to episode 550 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. In addition to the Friends mug that I picked up in the 90s, we also have this Friends mug that our friend gave us a few weeks ago. And he then gave us a companion mug, a slightly different form, this week. So anyway, these are all the Friends mugs we have in the house. But, back to the show. We watched episode 550 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, September 25th, 1986. And that means last night was Wednesday, and the 7th season premiere of Dynasty aired. And Crystal stops Blake from strangling Alexis. Spoiler alert. And Amanda is rescued from the fire at La Mirage, but thankfully, Claudia is not. All right. Claudia was one of my least favorite characters on Dynasty.
And she was up until that point, the last surviving member of what was Dynasty's equivalent to the Perkins family on Santa Barbara.
That's right. That whole poor family that was introduced in season 1. In Santa Barbara, Cece and Sophia receive surprise invitations to their own bachelor and bachelorette parties. Of course, they do not know that these have come from Gina. And I kind of vaguely had some memories once the storyline got revealed. Keith finds Gina interviewing male strippers for Sophia's bachelorette party. Mason finds an invitation to the wedding of Channing Creighton Capwell and Gina DeMott Capwell amongst Gina's things. And Gina says, "What do you care?" And Mason says, "Sophia might care." And Gina says, "Don't go blabbing my daydreams." So she kind of manages to gloss over that quite well. But of course she has plans. Mason asks Gina if Keith supplied the drugs to Santana. And Gina says that he'll probably blame her, like Santana did. Mason says if Keith can be gotten out of office, that's going to leave a very vacant position, and I know the man who can fill it.
So we are seeing Mason back into full Mason form.
And we almost can't quite remember why he got kicked out of the DA's office originally, can we? Exactly what was it that he did? Or was it something that he did to Cece and Cece got him removed?
I think that was it.
Of course, there's another lawyer in town who might want that position. And it's not Lindsay Smith. The lab confirms that the drugs found in Keith's apartment are the same ones found in Santana's pill bottle. So, Cruz at one point is about to get a warrant, an arrest warrant for Keith, but then thinks the better of it and thinks he needs a little more evidence. So, maybe in the next episode. I know Cruz told Keith that he better hurry up and finish anything he needs to do before too long. Courtney brings Pearl flowers, and well, you know, she says she loves him, and he says he doesn't love her. So, and then she says, "Well, you're moping around here waiting for Kelly to come back. You'll be waiting for someone who's going to spend the rest of her life in prison." Cece asks Courtney to go to Italy to bring Kelly home for the wedding, and Pearl begs to go with her. And Courtney says that she'll make sure Kelly sees Pearl as soon as she gets back to Santa Barbara. I think Courtney is hoping for a whole flight alone with Kelly to maybe make sure that she has no interest in Pearl. I think, I feel like I can't imagine Kelly having an interest in Pearl by the time she comes back after, her time in Italy. Julia brings Pearl more property transfer papers to sign. This is the longest property transfer deal that in history. I thought it was done twice before. Now it's a third round of paper signing. Cece doesn't seem to have noticed all the Lockridges back on that land. Julia sees Pearl's invitation to the bachelor party and says she got one too. Pearl mentions that it was surprising that Lionel got an invitation. So, well, I think Gina's hoping there'll be some hijinks at these parties, and we'll see what they look like. Obviously, Gina can't attend both, so, whatever she's got planned, hopefully will be amusing, which is what I'm seeing for this. Julia realizes that Pearl is moping over Kelly, and Pearl says, "I really want to spend some more time with her. I have a feeling that maybe my life is ready for a new direction." But I realized, as this conversation went on, that the whole point of this conversation was to lead into a new storyline, because Julia says, "I feel the same way lately. I don't think romance is the way for me." But she tells Pearl that she wants to have a baby. And this is going to be a storyline that goes on for years in Santa Barbara.
Oh, wow.
Pearl makes some comment that I didn't quite hear, and then Julia says, "Are you asking or are you volunteering?" So the hunt is on for a sperm donor for Julia's baby, and Pearl is potentially the first person that she might be considering.
Now, I'm assuming if this storyline goes on for years, that Pearl probably won't be the one who gets their contribution in for it the first time around.
Well, you don't think Pearl's going to be around on the show for a while, forever? Or
No,
are you
what I
just
mean
thinking
is,
that
what I mean is, if he says, "Yeah, sure, I'll be your sperm donor," then that doesn't seem like a storyline that's going to go on for years.
Yeah, but then there's the whole thing of she being a single mother, but then, maybe I do want to be involved with the baby after all, says the father. There's a whole lot of back and forth stuff that these sorts of stories can generate.
That's true. That's true.
Keith tells Gina he needs to see Angel. He says someone planted pills in my apartment last night while you were passed out on your bed. Gina assures him that Angel wouldn't implicate him. Gina phones Angel, who is worried about coming back into town in case Keith throws him in jail on the existing drug charges. But Gina tells him that Keith can't do anything from jail. Gina tells Keith that she talked to Angel and Keith has nothing to worry about. Angel tells Cruz that he sold the pills to Keith. This actually involves Cruz roughing Angel up a little bit, which is interesting because, I don't know, maybe Angel tried to make it look good. Keith spots Angel with Cruz and goes to Gina's place and accuses her of betraying him, but she convinces him that Angel won't talk and offers him a back rub. So I think Keith is aware that things are unraveling for him potentially. He says he underestimated Cruz.
Now, I would think, remember, Keith had all these various connections to the underworld, and wasn't there that one guy, El Blanco, whatever his name is. So I would think if they just dig into Keith's connections a little bit, they could make a case for a lot of illicit behavior, even if this one doesn't stick.
Yeah, because it's weird that this is the one thing that he's not guilty of. Cece tries to convince Ted to cut Haley loose. Cruz tells Ted that his refusing to testify is stupid, considering, Brick's testimony is already on record. Ted says, "Does Haley even stand a chance if I back up Brick?" Cruz says, "Probably not." Ted says, "Lily Light is the only one who should be in jail, and that's what I'm going to say when we get into the judge's office." Julia tells Ted even Romeo would have turned on Juliet at this point. Ted says, "Haven't you ever been in love?" And Julia says, "I've also had scarlet fever. Ask me which I love best." The judge gives Ted until the end of the day to testify. Mason tells Ted he has a plan. Now I wonder, is his plan to become DA before these things can move forward? Because he's only got a couple hours. Evening comes and Cruz orders Ted to be taken to jail. As he's being taken through the lobby, Cece says, "Young lady, if you cared for my son, you would confess." And Haley says to Mason, "I have to confess now." And Mason says, "That won't help Ted. You just keep quiet." So I'm not sure what Mason's plan actually is as Ted's being dragged off to jail.
What I found interesting is she was saying this apparently quite loudly in front of Cece and Sophia. So,
and they're in quite a small area.
Yeah. So I'm assuming they heard her, although it's always hard to tell on these shows. But that would seem to implicate her. I guess they couldn't testify. That would be hearsay or something, I suppose. But
I think Brick's probably told them what he witnessed, which is minimal enough, but it shows that Ted is aware of Haley's involvement. Lily has a new nightmare of being caught in a burning building with Brick standing outside watching. Ooh, is this foreshadowing?
Could be.
Mason tells Lily he might be the next district attorney of Santa Barbara. And he says, "And what a nice power base this will make for us." And Lily is a little excited to hear the word "us." she was worried Mason was going to try to cut her loose. Mason wants Lily to tell the rest of the world why she came to Santa Barbara. So I don't know if he thinks this is going to be an important part for his running for DA, if he, has Lily at his side and somehow her secret needs to come out first to make things work. I don't know. But yeah, obviously I like Keith as a character. If he got somehow cut out as DA, I don't know what he would do on the show. Go back into private law practice, I guess. But I hope he sticks around. Or he might triumph over Mason. And Mason might have to wait for an election to come around. Because has anyone actually become DA on an election so far that we've seen? Or have these all been just interior shenanigans?
Yeah, I mean, I would think that there would be some kind of a campaign and a campaign period involved to be a district attorney.
Yeah, so. I don't know what the rules are in Santa Barbara. Maybe, between elections, the mayor and or city council can just appoint an interim DA. And then who's the assistant DA right now? I think, did we see a guy once in a while? Not Mason. That's it for the Thursday episode. So maybe we'll have a bit of a cliffhanger on Friday. Seems like it's probably too soon for the bachelor party, but I bet we'll have something to look forward to next week on that front.
Now, do we think we are ever actually going to see this reunion?
Well, I mean, I saw a photo once online that looks like it's at a reunion, but maybe it's a different reunion. So
I've had high hopes for it for quite some time, and I feel like it should have happened by now.
Yeah, bachelor party, reunion, several people potentially going to jail, and a wedding in November, and Kelly coming home for at least a short period of time for the wedding.
And remember, Cece's birthday has been in October, apparently. So maybe that's something as well.
And we still haven't met Pamela. Someday. We'll be back after we watched episode 551 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've watched episode 551 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Friday, September 26th, 1986. Gina gets Keith. No, that's backwards. Keith gets Gina to call Cece to ask for Kelly. But Cece is not fooled by her Italian accent. Then Keith has a trace put on all inbound flights, as well as a flag on all private airfields. Cece seems to just be talking about using the Capwell jet to bring Kelly in. So I don't know why they actually managed to get Kelly past all these checks.
Yeah.
But Kelly Capwell is back in Santa Barbara.
Which must mean the Princess Bride is done with filming.
Courtney hides Kelly at the boathouse, but tells Pearl that the only man Kelly asked to see was Nick. I don't believe Courtney. How about you?
I don't believe Courtney. I think she's playing with Pearl. But I'm actually not convinced that Kelly has a really huge amount of love for Pearl either. So I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't really ask about anybody.
I wonder if Courtney made up the Nick thing.
Yeah.
Just to make it more painful for Pearl.
I feel like she did.
Pearl decides to look for Kelly. He says, Santa Barbara's not that big a town. So she's at the Capwell Boathouse. Did I already say that? So we did not see Kelly in this episode. We just hear about her from Courtney, basically.
And this kind of makes me feel like one of the things that Kelly Capwell tends to evoke in men is the need to be a stalker. And the fact that, Pearl is now heading off to find her. Shades of many of her other former beaux.
Yeah, it's very interesting that different characters tend to draw certain things. It's like on Melrose Place, we notice Jo is constantly trying to get blown up by her lovers. So Keith has the house searched for Kelly, so he thinks she's in the Capwell house. But basically, Cece just tells everyone, we're just planning a wedding. Nothing else is happening here, and we'll just pretend Kelly's not in town. Cruz is angry with Victoria for hiding those letters. She seems to justified by saying you didn't want to be exposed to all that pain. Victoria wants Cruz to come to the beach with her so they can put things at rest, but Cruz refuses. So she goes alone, and we see quite an extended version of the various flashbacks, some of which we've seen before and some of which are new. She remembers making out with Cruz on the beach, and we see Cruz's hand brush against her ear, and that's when the earring gets dislodged and lost in the sand. Cruz does arrive at the beach after all, though, and says, well, I've figured it out. You hoped that Katie would find us on the beach, which Victoria admits to, which explains why Victoria's, is so guilty about it. Eden had said to Cruz, why would she be so guilty 5 years later if she didn't actually do anything? Then there's a flashback to Katie swimming into the sea and Cruz running to get the beach patrol. Katie calls for help, but she's actually still fully clothed and continues to swim further out. Yeah. So I think Victoria rightly identifies this as just an attempt to get Cruz to swim out to get her. And Victoria says, it's not going to work this time. She mutters to herself. After Katie drowns, Victoria realizes that her earring is missing. I think we've seen that scene before. Cruz actually sees her, in the present day looking through the sand. And Cruz says, I think it's long gone. Eden tells Victoria that Cruz loves her best, more or less, and lays a trail of roses for Cruz at the beach house.
Now, it's interesting to me seeing this slightly less savory side, maybe, of Victoria, because one of the things, I haven't really commented much on this storyline, but one of the things that has perturbed me a little bit about it is that she's got all these old letters from this fairly disturbed dead woman who she keeps flogging off to everybody to read, and that just seems so sort of disturbing to me that you would do that. So I don't know if this maybe indicates that maybe she has some mental health issues as well, if this is just a soap opera thing, or maybe this is the only thing I've kind of picked up on that makes this storyline compelling to me. But anyway.
It makes me wonder how much of this was planned out in advance of the storyline when they were plotting it out. Did they have the letters in mind, or did it just come up in the writer's room? Let's have her find some letters now to stretch this out a little more and explain things a bit more. Lionel tells Jane how much he likes it when his family comes home, and Jane says her mother really never made a home for them. And Lionel says her mother must be very beautiful if Jane is anything to go by. So maybe our theory of Lionel and Jane is moving forward. Lionel and Jane discover a dinosaur bone in the garden they're digging for minks. And after some research in some books from the library, they estimate the head of the dinosaur is under Cece's bedroom, and they joke about demolishing the Capwell mansion to perform an adequate excavation. This is kind of fun, and I kind of vaguely remember something about a dinosaur, but I can't remember how excessive this dig ends up becoming. Is it just going to be one bone, or will they find an entire dinosaur?
It is fun, and we even got a little callback. I can't remember if it was this episode or the one before, where Lionel actually talks about his career as a mattress salesman with his own broadcast. So that was really fun, too. I have to admit, when they were first digging up this bone, I thought, maybe there's a body buried in the backyard. Wouldn't that be an interesting thing? But they both seem to know a little bit about paleontology, so I think they would have recognized that right away.
I think
a dinosaur is fun.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if it, they end up bringing in digging equipment and trampling half the Capwell property. I think Lionel did make a joke. Oh, I knew Cece had his secrets buried, but I didn't think they were on my property, or something like that.
Yeah.
Gina pretends to be German as she and Sophia get their dresses altered at the same time. Sophia asks the dressmaker when Gina's wedding is, and the dressmaker says, "Oh, I think this is probably just going straight into her hope chest." So Gina's a little ticked off to hear that, but she's generally gleeful throughout this episode.
It did occur to me while I was watching this that, generally bridal shops are not really that big. I would think the seamstress would know that the second
Gina was
Mrs.
there.
Capwell was actually there in the next change room. But,
And she's already got the dress on, so she
Yeah.
must have gotten the dress from the dressmaker when she first arrived.
Yeah.
So she could try it on. Or Gina's paying her to keep quiet, but then she's also insulting Gina. So, Gina has this nice big veil that she pops down when Sophia comes by, and she talks to pretend she only speaks German, so Sophia doesn't recognize her. Sophia shows up at her bachelorette party and is immediately surrounded by a group of male strippers who take off their underwear just as someone snaps a photo. Meanwhile, a giant cake is being wheeled into the Capwell atrium, and Gina pops out of the cake and kisses Cece as another photograph is taken. Now, I had remembered these bachelor parties being this huge thing, and I remembered, once they started talking about it, the bachelor parties, I remembered Gina pops out of a cake. That's the only thing I did remember. But I was shocked that these were actually two very short scenes, like 2 30-second scenes was the sum total of the parties. No one else was present. We heard Lionel was invited to this one, and Julia was invited to that one, but we didn't see anyone else at, I think it was the Orient Express, where Sophia's was. We just saw Sophia and Cece, and one other person was in the atrium when the stuff showed up, I think.
Yeah, I have to admit it was, I don't know if a letdown is, because it was fun, but I was sort of hoping Gina would use these opportunities a bit more spitefully, maybe even for a little touch of blackmail or something. But, the picture of Sophia with the 4 strippers, that's actually pretty standard bachelorette party fare, I think.
Cece and Sophia, got their envelopes with the photos, and basically at the same time. They were both at the house, so they both opened them together, and they look at each other and they go, "Gina!"
Yeah.
And then Sophia says that she's going to give Gina a piece of my mind, and if that doesn't work, I'm going to give her a piece of my fist. So she actually does go over to Gina's place, where Gina is still wearing her wedding dress and checking herself out in the mirror. And in the ensuing fight, Sophia tears the dress off Gina and either stumbles or is pushed, loses her balance, hits her head on a chair, which is not entirely unupholstered, but she loses consciousness as a result of that. And Gina freaks out that she may have killed Sophia.
Well, I'm pretty sure she didn't kill Sophia, but, a little touch of amnesia or something might throw a bit of a wrench into the wedding plans, at least enough for
Sophia
Gina
might
to
wander around town as a bag lady, and everyone wonders where she is. Gina can swoop in and marry Cece.
Maybe she'll become Dominic again. That'd be fun.
I guess we'll find out next week what's who comes to the boathouse, and whether Keith finds Kelly, whether Pearl finds Kelly. And we've got a couple of characters we haven't seen for a while showing up next week. So that'll be nice. And
But not Jade or Marissa.
not any Perkinses, will. Other than Johnny, we'll never see another Perkins. Tonight is Friday, and it's the 10th season premiere of Dallas. And we're going to find out why Patrick Duffy was in that shower in May. So we'll keep you posted next week. When we return for week 114 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
am going to give her a piece of my mind, and if that doesn't work, I'm going to give her a piece of my fist.